Welcome to another episode of Exes and Babies. I'm Jeff Cheatham. I'm here with Sydney Swanigan, and we're also here with a very, very special guest, Dr. Sunita Iyer. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Hi.
Good to have you here. So, without me running down and pumping you up and gassing you up, I'm gonna allow you to do that yourself. So, who is you, doctor?
One of the things that I am as a doctor. I'm a mom.
Yes.
I'm a professor. I'm also a midwife.
Okay.
I'm a writer.
Mm-hmm.
I like play tennis.
Okay.
So recreational tennis player and a very bad golfer.
Okay. So
very bad. Okay, got it.
So sleep is.
I actually do sleep now.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. But I don't catch babies anymore right now.
Yeah. Sleep intervention.
Yeah, so I am sleeping these days.
Okay.
Yeah, my clarity is high.
Yeah. So you're a professor at University of Washington in Bothell.
Yep.
You're a doctor. So which field of doctorism are you in? I know that's a hard word. I'm sorry. So which field are you?
I was mostly doing primary care and working in pediatrics and doing a lot of perinatal care. So working with pregnant people, postpartum, and just all family stuff.
What got you into that?
I actually worked with teens in Boston for a couple years, and they were pregnant or parenting, and it was looking at how they were treated in the system, the birth experiences, the postpartum experiences, the lack of support for feeding, that actually inspired me to look more into, well, how could I support people in doing this kind of work so that they could have positive experiences as they become parents instead of feeling like trash.
You said problems with feeding.
Oh, yeah.
So what do you mean by that?
Not being supported if they wanted to breastfeed, being told that, they were too young or too, ignorant to know how to breastfeed properly, that they would starve their babies. And so feeling like their only option was to feed formula. And for a lot of them, it was reasonable.
Okay.
And, for me, it's not necessarily what people choose one way or the other, but just feeling supported in whatever choice you want to make.
Good.
That's beautiful.
So so your experiences in Boston, what was the foundation for you to I want to pursue this as a career? Like what happened?
Well, wow, a lot of things happened.
Okay.
A lot of really positive experiences, but also a lot of very eye-opening experiences about even in these, world-renowned hospitals, this is what happens to people when they come in to give birth, that they're treated like a medical problem instead of humans participating in a normal, healthy human life event.
Right.
And that's the part of the situation I wanted to be involved in, was the humans being involved in a human event. I know sometimes things go wrong and, that happens too. And I'm happy to have really amazing people who care for them. But a lot of times it just goes normally. So that's where that's kind of where I wanted to be.
I love that.
That's amazing, man. And as a guy, I'm sympathetic towards the situation regarding birth and health, birth and rights and all that stuff. But it's still, what can I do? What can I do to help out? Because
allyship.
I'm trying to, because it's I don't want to be dismissive because of course I don't want to be like the guy that doesn't happen to me, so why should I care? So what advice would you give to men who need to get out there and care and allyship?
Honestly, just learn from all the sources that they can learn. So whether if you like to read books, read a book. If you're a blog guy, read a blog, but actually do your own reading and learning. I think honestly the same way I would recommend to people if they really wanted to learn how to be an ally to anybody else, whether it's around race or sexuality or gender, go do your homework. And don't make the person who is in that position be the person who has to teach you.
Right.
And at least in situations where maybe I have lived in a brown body my whole life, I can tell you a little about what the experience is like.
Yeah.
But for a first-time pregnant person, they don't know what it's like either. So there's a lot of situations that happen where folks lean on the pregnant person to tell them how it's supposed to be, as if they're the expert. So I usually just recommend to partners, dads, hey, there's a lot of resources out there. Just consume them, all of them. Right. There's good ones and bad ones. So come and bring your questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So we could get into that topic all day long, but we're here about co-parenting stuff. So how long have you been a co-parent?
3.5, almost 4 years.
Yeah, 4 years.
Yeah.
Okay, veteran.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe not.
Sort
Maybe not,
of.
maybe
Sort
not.
of. Yeah, it's come in phases. So,
Okay.
yeah.
That seems reasonable. So tell me, how's your experience been? Like coming into co-parenting, like maybe how it started, where is it at now in terms of the dynamic that you and your partner have, co-parent partner?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we started actually trying to co-parent a little bit and splitting up some of those responsibilities while we were still living in the same house. So we had this idea that maybe we'd tried the bird nesting thing, and then I was like,
What's that? What's
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I read a couple articles about it back then where someone said it's when the couples decide to separate or divorce, even, go through the whole legal process, but stay in the same house.
Ooh, yeah.
And some people work it out where one parent leaves the house for some period of time so that one parent can be in the house with the kid. But the idea is that the kiddo stays in the same house, or kids, and that the parents are the ones who come and go. And that idea appealed to me in theory.
Yeah, sounds nice.
good.
Yeah.
So that my kid didn't have to experience that disruption,
Right.
because he was 8 at the time,
Yeah.
or 8.5. And, but the reality of that was not, it soon became really clear for me, not necessarily even of how it was playing out, but just my own evolution. I was like, oh no, I can't do this. That's not actually what I want.
Right.
So
Right. And there's options. There's no one way to co-parent.
no.
At all. Yeah, we talked a little bit about parallel parenting and such, and we'll dive into that a little bit later. But so tell me about when that moment came where you knew it was time to let's start doing this different. Let's go into co-parenting.
We were probably about 6 months in, but I think I knew a couple weeks in, but just wanted to give it time to evolve. And then we decided to get different places, and that was, a bit of a challenge, like who was going to go, who was going to stay. And so there was a little bit of working that part out. And then we actually ended up working with a mediator, which I thought was really helpful.
Okay.
There was a lot of questions that I wouldn't have known to ask if we didn't have someone who were really familiar with the process.
Okay.
And she had a template and, a whole form that we could follow to and answer a lot of questions to get at our values. And then we could start there. So that's kind of where it started, was with that process. And we came up with a schedule, but then COVID happened. So this was lockdown was March of 2020. I found the place I was going to move into, I think 2 weeks before lockdown happened.
Oh no.
And then I couldn't move into it right away. And it was an agreement that I had made with the person. They wanted to stay an extra month. And I was like, yeah, no problem.
Right.
I'm not in an unsafe situation. I, have somewhere to be.
Okay.
So we waited another month still. So then the first 6 weeks of lockdown, we were living together still, but not necessarily wanting to be.
Right. That sounds
That was fun.
challenging.
Yeah. When's your book coming out?
No, actually, no, for real.
Well, I think one of the first nights he was like, I'm going to go do a quick Costco run. Would you like this bottle of whiskey? And I was like, yes. Yes.
This one, not this one, but this one.
I was like, yes, please.
Yes.
Whatever size they have.
I love it. Yeah, there's so many COVID stories, I'm sure, but I never thought about
The,
trying
aspect.
to separate and being forced to be in the same household while all this craziness is ensuing.
And not knowing how long that was going to go on.
Right.
And so I ended up moving out in essentially what was still lockdown.
Okay.
And that was it was anticlimactic to start your new life and not have anyone be able to help you come over. So, I mean, I did a Zoom housewarming. It was the saddest thing ever.
No. Do people do that? Was it worth it?
No.
Okay.
I literally walked around with my
community talking.
I walked
great,
around
but-
with my computer. I was like, this is my new
That's so amazing.
Oh my God.
I was sort of laughing and crying at the same time.
Oh, no.
Not the last tears. No.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, when COVID happened, which almost seems like it was a lifetime ago, they say that it gave them time to think about things.
Yeah.
Like they got to learn more about who they really were because they were isolated from somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Did that experience happen to you?
Definitely.
So what did you learn about yourself?
Man.
Regarding this situation, yeah.
Yeah.
Or not.
So
Or
many,
not.
so many things,
So many
right?
things.
Honestly, for me, once the process got underway and then we were working with a mediator, there's so many details that you're taking care of, like money and the schedule and all that kind of stuff. And there's some conversations about values, but you don't actually really know how this is going to play out.
Right.
You don't actually know what it's going to be like when, okay, now you're dropping him off. Now I'm dropping him off. When someone's 2 hours late, how are we handling that? When the clothes end up at one person's house, like there's it, and it sounds like all silly stuff.
Nah.
But it's just like any like it's, you know, like the socks on the floor or the dishes by the sink, right? Like that stuff adds up. And they very often look like the same patterns that were. And that was the thing that I realized in COVID, because then all the other variables went away, right?
Yeah.
We didn't have commuting. We didn't have all the activities. So we couldn't say, oh, I got late because, or this thing didn't happen because.
Like, blame traffic.
Oh, like
Right.
that,
There was no
that
traffic.
that's not actually happening. So I'm.
This is some truth.
Right.
So you said values.
Yeah.
So I really want to, we wanted to touch on that.
Yeah.
So values, religious, cultural, all of the above. Is that values?
Well, I mean, religion, not so much for me.
Okay.
I was raised, I'm going to say actually atheist. I mean,
Okay.
my dad definitely said when we were kids, there's no such thing as God.
Okay.
God's not coming to help you.
He
You
took
know,
Figure it out.
We are your support team. Your family is your
right.
support team.
Gave no credit
So-
to Santa at all. Huh?
No, I mean, we
They're
did
like,
do it, but we always knew, yeah,
Right.
because it was American, right? So we wanted to
Right.
participate in the American things.
Okay.
But that if there was a sanctuary, it was family. You know, that's definitely a core value. And so that was really tricky for me to figure out, well, where does my family still fit in this equation? That was a whole other ball of wax because they had no idea what to do with this.
Okay.
And they were going through their whole grieving process. And then I'm having to manage their grief and my stuff too. So there was that.
Like their grief of you separating.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the
got it.
loss of family. Like for them, it was a
Yeah.
really big deal that this person, because we were together for 20 years.
You were together for 20 years.
Yeah. So
Oh.
this person had been part of their lives for 20 years. We took vacations together. We traveled to other countries together. You know, they were our full-time care providers for our son for 3 years.
Wow.
So, you know, the five of us were like a unit.
It's all co-parenting in a sense.
Oh,
like,
yeah. My son was, you know, the sun, and we were 4 planets orbiting. Oh, yeah.
That's beautiful.
And I think people don't recognize that a lot, like the impact that has on the family.
Yeah.
Like the mom, the dad,
Separating.
the aunties, the uncles, 'cause especially if you like 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big factor.
I didn't see it coming. I'll be honest.
Okay.
I knew my parents I knew in my gut my parents were going to be super disappointed, and they'd be so disappointed in me. And maybe it's a family thing, maybe it's a cultural thing. The way we express disappointment is with critique,
Okay.
and harsh critique at that.
Okay.
So,
And
peer review.
Maybe worse than a peer review.
You're right.
way worse. And I didn't really anticipate the level of anger, honestly, that they would have toward me about it.
Where do you think that anger came from?
My dad told me this actually pretty recently. So this is, you know, how when things like evolve and then they keep evolving. We actually had another conversation about it just about a month or two ago. And he said, I was so ashamed because all I've ever, like, and we're all immigrants. He's like, all I've ever wanted for you was for you to be happy and successful. And successful, part of that means, you know, you find a guy, you get married, you make your family, and then you live out the rest of your life. He said, so I don't have to worry about you. And he said, and now, you know, it feels like I didn't do my job to set you up properly. He said it was his own shame.
Okay.
And he felt angry at himself. He felt angry at me also for making their life really challenging. You know, like, how am I supposed to deal with this person now? What do I do? Am I supposed to like them? You know,
Yeah.
like, I don't know how to answer any of your questions, actually.
I'm still dealing with me and what I've got going on
Yeah.
and my child.
But yeah, my mom, I think, was less angry, but my dad was really angry.
Okay.
And that was so hard. I mean, that actually was the most devastating thing about my divorce and co-parenting in the first year was my parents' disappointment and anger. And I don't think in that entire year they ever asked me, how are you doing? Even in the conversation where I told them I sat down with them. He didn't want to be part of that conversation. He's like, well, they're your parents. I'm like, okay.
We should talk about that
But
too,
yeah,
right?
exactly. And I said, well, but they've been our family for 20 years, but okay.
Right.
So I went and had the conversation, and it kind of went in the end exactly how I knew it would.
Okay.
And it was just like, I can't believe you would do this. You know, I mean, is he beating you? And I was like, no, I think he would know that. Well, then what's the problem? What's the problem? Just stay for 10 more years. And I was like, wait, what? You want me to do 10 more years? He's like, well, just wait until he's 18. And I was like, well, what? My son. And I was like, well, what purpose would that serve? Right? For him to be 18 and say, oh, I stuck it out for 10 more years, son, you know, and didn't tell you what was actually going on. I was like, do you think he's not going to know?
Right.
He's not a dummy.
Right.
Kids don't not know that these things, they might know exactly, but they know something's
They
wrong.
can feel it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
My mom
that's
was a little
powerful.
less angry. She eventually was like, I think she actually just felt really devastated also because she felt like she should have known. Like, you're my kid. I see you all the time. How could I not have known? And I was like, because there was no way I was going to let you know. I'm a master at keeping whatever I don't want people to know very firmly hidden away. Like, that is, you know, that's a genuine skill set. I have compartments.
I worked hard at this.
I was like, I have compartments far deeper than I am tall. Like, they, you know, I can put that way far down and you'll never touch it. So, and I was like, there was no way you were going to know. And I said, because we spent so much time together, like, there was no way I could let you know because it would have infected everything. My ex and I also owned our clinic together. And my dad was also involved in that with us. I mean, there were so many. There was like this. Yeah. So
well, I just want to commend you for not letting all these other things impact what you really needed to do for yourself and ultimately for everybody, right? Because your happiness is important for your son, for you, and for your whole family, right? And once hopefully they've been able to grieve and, you know, see that. But I just want to commend you, especially knowing all these different reasons that many people would say, I can't do it because of this. This will be too hard. We got business, we got child, we got family, we got cultural whatever expectations and things like that. So I commend you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That's
super
why it lasted
brave.
20 years. But
How did that make you feel though? Like, they say, I'm angry with you.
yeah.
Even though you're going through that at home, and the fact that the people that you're supposed to, hey, I need help, they say we're disappointed with you. They're like, how did that make you feel? What did that make you think?
I mean, that I was totally alone. It was definitely the most lonely time of my entire life. And then you know, layer that with COVID.
Oh,
Right.
boy.
Oh man.
Man, I'm like, as I'm saying this right now, I'm like, that was dark. It was a dark year, that first year. And then, you know, things shifted. You know, they gradually shifted and moved as they saw me they started to see parts of me that they hadn't seen either before or since I was a little kid.
Like what? You gotta tell us.
I mean, they just saw me smile more.
Okay.
Like,
See,
I was
that's what I'm saying.
I was so tired. I was so tired all the time. And I was so, well, when you have all the things in compartments, it's heavy and it's exhausting. And I was so held together all the time. And I couldn't, and, you know, because I was holding a lot together. And they didn't know, but my mom would always say, oh, you look so tired, you know, or she'd like touch my face like, oh, your skin looks so.
Moms be knowing.
Great.
Moms do know.
I'm just caring for the whole community as a clinician as well as like my family.
My golf game is slipping. So
what do you want me to be shining radiant? Like
Right.
what? Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
So
Well, it is
Expectations
definite.
are
I would say
high.
that piece is probably a little cultural. It's sort of like, you know, they don't compliment. They don't say, you know, oh, you look beautiful. That would bring the evil eye upon you or something, right? It's like it's a layover from that. So the way you express love is by telling your kids all the different ways that they are not performing so that they can.
okay,
It's
cool.
generous.
Okay, that's a
Good to
perspective.
know that me and my friends have been getting loved on for years.
You gotta. That's a certain level of trust, though, to be able to. Like,
yeah.
So
definitely.
What's the cultural background of your family?
We're all from India.
India. Okay.
Yeah. So my parents and I were all born there, and then my parents grew up there all the way until their 20s, and then moved. My dad moved away first, and then my parents actually had an arranged marriage too. Okay. So he decided at some point, he was like, I'm ready to get married. So he sent the blue air mail to all the family back in India and said, hey, I'm ready to meet a bride. Mm-hmm. And they set up, for him to meet 10, 12 different people. He took a 2-week vacation from his job, went back to India, met 10 or 12 people. He was like, she seems cool.
Really?
And
like that? That's
I need to do that.
Now it's different. If you ever watch that Netflix series, Indian Matchmaking,
I started.
It's not like that.
Oh,
but I mean that's a certain socioeconomic strata that gets married like that. Most people actually do it even now, still this way. But but also the way I'm describing is still a little old fashioned.
Yeah.
But like he could only get 2 weeks off work, so he went and did that. And her father met with him and said, asked him, are you a teetotaler? Which is like the British term, like, do you only take tea? Is tea the totality of your drinking, or do you use alcohol?
Oh, okay.
And he said, I am not a teetotaler, because he'd been working in the Middle East and then in New York. And my grandfather said, well, I like that he's honest. And he has a job in the United States. He'll probably provide well for you. So my mom was like, all right. And she was 20.
So was she really just like, all right?
I mean, she didn't have a choice.
Okay.
Really.
Got it.
She was 20. I mean, my grandfather wouldn't have forced her to marry him, but at some point she would have been encouraged to marry somebody.
Right.
And she's like, okay, he seems fine. And they got married. He went back to New York. She came over a couple months later. And that was that. So she moved out of her dad's apartment in Bombay to my dad's apartment in Queens.
Wow.
And they're still married to this
They're
day.
still married. And I got to say, it's fascinating to look at them and see what they have learned as married people and think, why didn't you share any of that with me?
I don't know. Yeah. I feel like across cultures, I feel like that generational, like, older generations, they don't share things. Even my mom, she's just now sharing things with me that would have been helpful in terms of womanhood. And she shared a lot. She did a great job. But like there's some things, like even like how she does her makeup or like certain things. And I wasn't interested in it at the time, but or she'll share about her dating life. I'm like, oh, I wish you, and cause I'm sure her mom didn't tell her about her dating life. And so anywho,
and I don't know that I would have listened. Right. Like it's not like they got to date. My mom definitely never dated. So, it was, our lives were so different. Right. Like she was raising a teenager in Jersey and she'd grown up, only ever living in either her father's or her husband's homes.
Got it.
Now, so happens she is a complete badass. Like, she went on to become like a director in a tech corporation. Yeah. She basically retired early to be, grandma to my son. Like she is something else. Right. And the way that they have grown together is really, it's really beautiful. The way that they keep doing that. And that has really been a huge part of our repair in this last couple of years since my divorce. Because they are those kinds of people. Like they're really dedicated to like learning and growing and being better. So they are very resilient humans. So, but I would have loved to have a couple, little bits of wisdom.
Like what?
Just I think growing up in this country, there's so many narratives about like, marriage is all about love and chemistry and happiness. And I didn't even think about, like, when I thought about compatibility, I thought about likes and that kind of thing. I didn't think about, like, do we actually have the same, are we compatible in terms of how we spend money? Are we compatible in terms of our drive and our ambition? Are we compatible about the way, like, we buy food and what we eat and whether we waste food, And it turned out we weren't actually that compatible in terms of some of the, like, core values, not of being a human, but of being people who share a home together.
Okay.
We were not, we did not share values in terms of how to be in a home together. We would have been great friends.
Okay.
Because your co-parent is not, doesn't have the India.
No.
Okay.
No, he is French, Canadian, Irish, but yeah.
Okay.
But, raised in the States. So, yeah.
Okay.
How was that reaction like when you first came about with your parents, seeing as how your mom and your dad met? How was that process when your co-parent came in the picture?
Well, I think my parents, so they really wanted us to be very American. So we were raised like very heavily assimilated compared to the rest of the Indian community we grew up with.
And was this in Boston?
In Jersey.
Jersey.
Yeah, I eventually went to Boston, but so I grew up there. And so there's a lot of Indian families there, a lot of Indian immigrant families. And we were probably the most American of the kids.
Okay.
And that was on purpose. My dad was like, we're Americans, and I was like, well, everybody here keeps telling us we're not, but okay.
Right, that part.
But he was like, he really wanted us to be proud of that too. So I think that they expected that we wouldn't have arranged marriages.
Okay.
They never mentioned it, never were like, well, eventually this is how this is going to end up. Do your American thing, but you're eventually going to do this thing. Right. I think on some level I might have even expected, they might have expected that we would end up with people who were not Indian.
Okay.
But when I think back on it, I dated lots of different kinds of people. Also, just the population was more diverse. Okay. So I dated people of all different races. I think, though, maybe in their heart of hearts, they might have wanted someone who is Indian. Okay. Because there were certain pieces of that would have felt more like home and comfortable.
Right.
Yeah. Unspoken things that can only be understood. But,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Like one thing that used to drive my ex crazy is my parents. So our family language is Tamil, which is a South Indian language, and when my sister and I understand it, we speak it, but they love to drop into it when they want to have a private conversation that is not private. Like they're sitting right next to us and then talking over us in our language. We're like, you do know we understand everything you're saying. And that was how it started, is we would sit on the top of the stairs and listen because we were like, oh, they're talking in Tamil. They're talking about us. So we would listen, and that's how we learned. So they would do that. He would be in the car, and they would talk about him.
Oh snap! I want to be okay. Let me not to.
And I was like,
right.
you guys,
I got a story.
So rude. And it was also sort of funny.
But is it rude? I mean, we could spend probably time on that.
Yeah.
But I mean, to talk about someone in front of them. But if you don't know, it's
right.
When I've gotten my nails done at salons, where it's usually Vietnamese salons, I started using the Google Translator. I would turn the volume down. See, just saying, for your next partner, if they're not, if they don't speak your language, that language, then anyways, but I would turn that on and I just try to, I don't know if that's a breach of what I felt dirty. Nah. It felt bad.
Yeah.
I felt like I would get kicked out of that salon if they
you gotta
knew.
know what's going on.
But I was like, and they're like talking about something else. But
right.
Anywho, but I just feel like learning a language too, I feel like you get to understand someone just differently. Yeah. So do you think your ex would have ever tried to learn the language or?
No, okay. He didn't necessarily express any interest. Okay. And, we did have that conversation once. I said, you could understand them if you wanted to learn. He's like, I don't really want to know what they're saying about me. So I'm like, okay.
Some things are meant to not.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about your son? Is he learning the language?
Sort of, in the way that we started learning as kids. Okay. Like, so I actually learned more as an adult. Oh. My parents said they tried talking to both of us, mostly to me, because my sister's younger, in Tamil, and I would respond in English.
Yeah.
So I always understood, but would refuse to speak in the language back to them. So now we do more. So he's kind of doing the same thing where they can ask him questions, but he'll respond in English. Right. Okay. But he has the accent and a lot of the vocabulary down. Okay. And it's interesting to watch him do that because he's heard it from, the very day he was born. I mean, they were sitting literally in the room when he was born.
Just talking away. Yeah.
I love that sense of family and closeness. So I know it must have been really rough during that period with the changes. Yeah. Talking about like learning language and so on and so forth, like how do you feel that that your son is supported in both households in terms of learning all the aspects of his identity? That's
a good question. I think I'm struggling with that one a little bit because I don't know still like what is the responsibility. We haven't really talked about it. I don't know that my ex feels like it's that important for him to talk about my son's identity. Okay. because he's not that parent. And maybe he feels like he shouldn't because he's not that parent. And because I'm there and my parents are there. So my sister also lives in town.
Okay.
And, with her family. So I think he feels like we have that covered.
He's like, between the 5 of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And her partner is Ghanaian, and
wow.
and my niece is both Indian and Ghanaian, and my nephew is also, biracial. So it's like there is. I think he feels like as the outlier, as like the white guy in the family. He's like, I'm not touching this conversation.
Okay.
But I know that my son identifies as a person who is mixed race.
Okay.
At least that's how those are the words he uses.
Okay.
But it's interesting. I don't think it gets talked about at all in the other household. And then in our household, it gets talked about a lot because everybody's brown and black. And so it's like, and my sister and I are also very politicized. And so we talk about these things a lot. And so it's sort of interesting that it doesn't get corroborated. And I'm kind of still sitting in that place. Like, I don't know if it has to or should, or if that feels confusing. I ask him periodically, like, do you feel like a white guy? And he was like, I know. Well, because there's so much conversation, like, and I know it comes out of our mouths when we start talking about what people do and what people say.
Right, it happens.
And how people act. And I know it comes out. And then I'm like, oops, because then I feel like I'm neglecting part of his identity too, right?
Yeah.
So I'm still, I feel a little conflicted about it, I'll be honest, about how to actually nurture that and whether my ex should feel any responsibility to it. I definitely feel like I at least want him to have conversations or at least be aware that people might not see his son the same way they see him.
Right.
And
is he aware of that?
I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't know if he really gets it. Because, we lived here in this town forever. Examples, like we would go out to a show and I automatically do a scan. I look around. I'm like, anybody here? Right.
The check-in.
Not
Yeah.
white.
Sure.
And I would look around and he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm scanning. So it was like, but after so many years, it's still like, it was still a question.
Yeah.
And I was like, how do you, it's for safety, man. You got to know. And I had never lived in a place like Seattle. I was like, why? I've never been to a city like this. Like I grew up in Jersey, lived in Chicago and then Boston and then DC and then moved here. And I was like, I have never been to a place like this in my life where I go to a hip hop show and there are 3 people in this room who are not white.
Oh, you can go to the MLK march and be a minority.
Yes.
As a black person, as a brown person.
Yes.
Which we love the allyship, but it is different.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so I just,
Yeah, that's so with that disconnect, did that play a role in some of your disconnect and needing to separate, or how do you see that playing out?
Now that I look at it more, I think it did. Okay. And I kind of thinking about the question you asked earlier about values, I think a lot of my values are actually some of those things that I wish my parents had told me about, like how to run a household, how to manage money, how to, feed ourselves and like how to plan for the future. Maybe some of that is immigrant, not just cultural, but a lot of that comes from my family of origin. Okay. And I realized that a lot of my core values of what I've really needed in my relationship were actually from my family culture. Okay. And that did actually feel like a big separation. And we had a lot of conversations about that. I won't say fights because we were very keen to say we never fight. Like, maybe we should have.
That's impressive. A lot of pressure, yeah.
Passionate discussions.
Yeah. Where, it would kind of almost come out as like an insult. Like, oh, well, your family does this, or your family's so particular about being on time. I was like, what's wrong with being on time? I don't think being 2 hours late is cool. Right. I hate being late.
Right.
It makes me feel terrible.
Right.
Or your family just cares so much about achievement. And I'm like, I love achieving. What's wrong with that?
Right. Like, it's not just my family, it's me too.
Being on time and achieving things is like,
it's me too.
Yes, exactly. And I think I realized like, oh, I am a lot that my family, I am a lot my culture. And I won't say that it's all Indians, right? I mean, because that's like 1.5 billion people. There's a lot of different ways to be Indian, but like it is definitely, I'll say at least the family culture.
Right.
Like a lot of who I am is rooted in that. And I see a lot of that in my son.
Right.
Like he was doing the morning drop off and my son would be late like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour.
To your house?
To everywhere.
Okay. Even school?
Oh, school. So this is how it came about. And then the principal finally calls me and I was on good terms with the principal, but I was like working like 80 hours a week. So I didn't get to do the morning drop off. Like I would leave the house by like 6:45, 7. And the principal finally called. She's like, well, I'm not really worried about your son. Like Rohan's a great student. He's a good citizen in school, you know, all that stuff. But he is late like 4 times a week. And I was like, I know, I can't bring him to school every day. And so that's what happens. So it wasn't working to have the conversation with my ex about like, he was like, what's the big deal? It's just first grade or, you know, whatever.
Oh, man.
And I was like, but school,
I'm always late and I still feel
but
away
I'm like,
about
school's
this.
really important. And I was like,
I'm
it's
not
just,
late to school.
and disrespectful to the teachers. And but he has a really different relationship with school. It wasn't a super positive experience for him. So then finally I talked to my son. I was like, hey, Mr. Riley called me, you know, concerned about your attendance. And I said, you're late a lot. What can we do about that? And he just looked down and he was sort of teary. He's like, I hate being late. And I was like, bingo. And that's when I went and said, like, he hates this. And he was like, oh, okay. Changed right away.
Okay,
when it was him, I was like, okay, cool.
That's
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Wait,
so-
let's take a moment to recognize. So you felt a way about it already. You didn't love it. It doesn't line up with your own values, family values.
Yeah.
And then, but when you asked your son,
Yeah.
I like that timing. You paused. You didn't go straight down
Right.
dad's
I was
throat.
going to.
Right, but you paused. You like something's
not
telling me
working.
that there's a better way. Like I'm gonna get better results. And then you also made it really about your son. Though, what does my son need? I love that. That's so important. I just want to make sure my listeners heard that.
Yes, yes. And I think that is like the best part of what we are evolving into is that if it's about what he wants, he's way more game
And thank
than
God
if
for
I
him.
say, you know, I want or I think that's a non-starter in the conversation.
Just
So
it ends the conversation.
it ends the conversation.
Real
So.
quick. I hear you. Same.
So have you been empowered to recognize and own the differences now?
Yeah.
Since the separate, like it's
Differences of what?
more of like values, like
Oh,
being on
okay.
time, the importance of school. Because you know when you're in a relationship, you have to compromise in
Yeah.
a certain way. But now that you separate, you're like, no, I really don't like being late. Or
Yeah.
we go respect education. So
Yep.
Right. That
So
part.
is there another big difference you've noticed now between the two households?
I mean, just like little things like chores. Like, I mean, like I always had, it was never negotiable, you know, like we all live here. We're all part of this community. We all do those things.
Right.
So, I mean, from the time he was 5, I had him doing chores.
Same. Yeah.
And so in my house, he does chores every week. I was like, you do your own laundry. You clean your own bathroom.
Yeah.
You help me put groceries away. You're helping to make the shopping list because half the food I make is for you. You know, all those things. And now starting to work on anticipating. Like, I need you to start looking around and think about what needs to be done here. I'm not the person who needs to tell you everything to do because I'm thinking ahead. I want you to be a great roommate or a partner someday.
Yep. Yep.
And while that might not be specifically a cultural difference, I see that in the way that my parents are in their marriage. Is well, my dad has a lot of weaponized incompetence, a lot.
I
But
haven't heard that term before.
Yeah, I
What
never
do you
heard that. That's a
mean?
good one.
oh, weaponized incompetence. That if I just say, "Oh, I don't know how to do that," or "You do it better than me," or "Why don't you do that? Because you always do it so great," you get out of doing it. And that was
That's filthy. I like it.
that
Oh,
was
never mind.
that was a
Okay.
theme for us.
Okay.
And I was like, well, you're right. I am better at doing it. And then I was like, wait a second. Why am I doing all the things?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm better at doing all the things now. Wait. I don't like
You're
this.
so good at it. Good job.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was probably one of the other, again, I don't, it's hard to say, like, is it family culture? Is it just culture? But that idea that like we all are in a communal situation, everybody, it's an all hands on deck kind of thing
Right.
was probably one of those other differences that I feel very empowered. Like, nope, this is my house. and this is how we do things.
Right.
This is our home, and this is how we do things in our home.
Beautiful.
And how you do things in your other home, that's for you two to work out. And so, yeah, empowerment is a big, it's an accurate word for how I feel about just being able to create that kind of relationship with my son too.
Yeah.
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 Strictly because it's like you, your son, your house. So it's like, okay, now I can implement what makes me feel good about this situation.
Yeah.
And like what you think is going to serve your son.
Mm-hmm.
I know for me, that's one of the things I tell my clients where, you know, they might feel disappointed that some values and routines aren't spread across households.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but they're still getting that with you though.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to be undervalued. Like that's a really critical thing. And you get to own that. You get to feel, you know, happy about that. And they get to learn multiple ways of running a household, and they get to choose later on.
Yeah, that's true. That's a really good point. I mean, they have different teachers every single year. I mean, he has 6 different teachers in a day. So they learn how everyone operates, and that's great. So,
That is so cool, man.
I want to get back. Were you going to say something? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I want to get back to the identity. And
yeah.
Because I think that's something key when I'm thinking about interracial blended families. And I feel like I'm thinking the word allyship. So we talked about allyship earlier.
yeah.
And I'm like, okay, what would it, I don't know. How do we think about allyship when it comes to blended family and, you know, that parent who might not identify with the more underrepresented race side of you, you know, they might still need to be an ally. I don't know. Me and my ex we do. My ex is Muslim and I'm spiritual Christian foundation.
Yeah.
And so I act as an ally and support them. And like, I might talk about some things or look, let's look it up together. I'm not sure what this word means. And so anywho.
I think that there was more allyship when we were actually together.
Okay.
And when he was connected in particular to my parents.
Okay.
And so one of the things that's starting to happen now that we're a little further out is that disconnect between him and my parents. And my parents, it's not that they don't, like they still invite him over for dinner and, you know, all these kinds of things. He's invited to all the family, like the big family functions. He comes over for Christmas and stuff, but that is starting to split apart.
Right.
And I think that he was more invested in talking about our family culture and our son's identity, mostly out of respect to my parents.
Right.
And as he gets further away from them, and definitely from me, it seems like that is less of a conversation. Like when I've asked my son, I try not to be too nosy, you know, because he's also 12 and a half. Like, you know, they know when you're being nosy. But also I really want him to feel like he can share with me what's happened. Like, I know he's safe, right? He's safe and his dad loves him. So like everything beyond that is just details. So I want him to share with me what he feels like is important. But when I have asked like, oh, do you guys like still eat Indian food? You know? And he was like, no, not really. I was like, oh, that's curious. I was like, you and your dad have always loved Indian food. He's like, yeah, we don't eat it. You know, do you talk about like the Indian holidays and things like that? He's like, no, actually, we haven't. So it's sort of interesting. Like those were things he was recognizing more when we were together.
Okay.
And not even because we were super dedicated to all like, you know, precisely acting out all the cultural rituals, but I think that, you know, he felt that need to keep my son more connected to his identity, and I don't think that that's as true anymore. So that'll be interesting to see if he feels split as he gets older. Like if he feels like he's Indian with me, but then white with his dad.
I mean, I'm not mixed, so I can't relate, but I am curious to see how that plays out. I mean, I have an opinion though. I would hope that I feel like it would just make sense to continue that nurturing. Maybe he's not the primary educator of that, like, you know, identity, right? Because he is not of the identity. There's probably a line, a boundary that would be appropriate. But I don't know, since we don't know, but like assuming maybe things have fallen off.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. I feels like kind of a miss. Because your son is both. He doesn't stop being Indian and white, like wherever he goes, right? And so, Yeah. We'll have to keep exploring that. But I don't know. I personally, I feel like allyship should start at home. I don't know.
Like that in a t-shirt.
Yeah. Right? Because even with our
yeah.
parents, we're different from our parents in some ways, right? Like, let's say, you know, your parents are heterosexual and you're not.
Right.
Then, happy Pride Month, by the way. Then, you know, they have to model allyship for their child. That's their first ally should be their parent.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's like we always model allyship with all the things that we aren't, you know, and that's part of being the ally.
Well, we should.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, sorry.
We're
but like, if we are interested in allyship, we're modeling this behavior of things that we may not be. I don't know. Like I always thought of myself as a straddler. Like I was Indian, but I was also really American. But neither side owned me, you know, because for Indian people, I was way too American. Like when we go back and visit aunties and stuff, like they were like embarrassed by me, you know, because I wasn't demure and quiet enough, and you know, and then on the American side, like, you know, then there's all of that. We're like, go back to where you came from, terrorist, lots of other names, you know, all kinds of things. So there's that both sides of like, well, nobody wants you.
Right.
But you're both.
Right.
And in his case, like, he's received kindly, you know.
Okay.
So at least I feel like he has maybe like some positive reps.
Right.
And so hopefully that's just how he feels about it. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I feel like this weight of like, if I don't do this thing, he's never going to get that. And maybe that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, I was curious, and I'm happy that you touched on it, because I was curious, because I know as a black man, right, you know, there's a lot of storylines going on when a black man or a black woman dates a white person. And I wanted, and you know, you touched on some of the racism that you experienced. Did that happen a lot when you guys were married? When you guys go out in public together?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, because because they don't talk about like everybody dealing with. There's only
they don't talk about white and black.
White and black. They don't talk about all other interracial relationships going through something. So I was curious. So So
either people would tell him like, oh, have you ever heard the phrase "O fetish"?
O fetish?
No. Oriental fetish. Oriental as like, well, now we talk about people being all Asian. It was like back then they were like, we're not rugs, you know, but but that was like a term back in the night. So if like a white guy dated anyone that wasn't white or black, you had an O fetish. Wow. And so people would say things like that to him. Wow. And he was like, what does that even mean? And I think I'm the only non-white person he's ever dated.
Okay.
And definitely for me, I got a lot of comments from people like, what are you doing with that white dude? Okay. You know, you're going to lose your culture.
Oh, wow.
You know, what do you think they want you? You think they, you know, they're going to ever let you be part of their family? You're an idiot. And, you know, they weren't totally wrong. I wasn't really.
You said they weren't totally
They
wrong.
weren't totally wrong. I wasn't part of their family, but, you know.
Yeah, because we haven't talked about his family.
Yeah, I know.
We don't.
We might not do it.
I mean, it's okay. It's okay.
So his family.
His family.
Yeah, go ahead.
So he grew up in a real small town, like post-industrial town on the New York and Canadian border. And so all the families there are pretty much French Canadian or Irish or both. Okay. And I think there's like one or two Indian people in that town. They're the town doctors.
Sorry. Okay. All right.
Yeah. But he never really had, you know, non-white friends. You know, until we met in Boston. But his family they were nice. They were polite to me, but they never really welcomed me as their family.
Butt behind it.
Yeah, I was never really welcomed as part of their family. They, you know, they didn't really treat me like a daughter. Like, and definitely when you have a family like mine, in contrast, that it's like, your family, come on in. I'm gonna tuck you in right here. You're coming on all the family vacations from day one.
Right.
You know. You're driving us to the airport, like
Right.
The good and bad.
Yeah, my family is like, as soon as we have identified you as family-ish, you're in.
You're in there.
You know,
I might need to branch out.
I know.
I'm telling you that.
Oh, whatever.
Find somebody to love you.
Find
somebody to love you.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, the way that they found the community I grew up with in Jersey is they moved to that town and they looked in the phone book for an Indian name, And they called them, and we are still friends with those people to this day.
I love that.
That was like 50 years ago. So that's the kind of community like I grew up with, where it's like all my aunties and uncles, they're not actual my blood aunties and uncles. They're just all those people. And so it's just really different than the way he grew up.
Right.
And he didn't grow up with that kind of community. His family of origin also, there's definitely like, it wasn't a positive upbringing. There was definite like what I would describe as an abusive household.
Yeah.
But from his description, everybody in town got beat. So,
Right.
you know, we have a difference of opinion on how that affects people. They have never said one word. I mean, I never got a call on a birthday or, you know, a Mother's Day or anything. And I mean, this is actually a little sweet. Like his mom really loves greeting cards.
Okay.
So what she would do is buy like Easter, Mother's Day, birthday, and then just send all three of them at once.
I love it.
Why
waste the Post-it?
Right, right. And then there was Father's Day in there, and his birthday and mine and his birthday are the same month. So she would just send all 5 cards in one envelope. That was probably the most relationship that we ever had. I've never spoken to them once since we've been divorced.
Wow. What about your son? Is he accepted by them?
I think that is a great question.
Okay.
From my perspective, no.
Okay.
And I think from his perspective, he's like, well, it's not like they're rejecting him or saying he's not our grandson. An example is that when he was younger, I'm, you know, the atheist thing, right? He was raised in the Catholic Church, like went to Catholic school. His uncle's a priest. Okay. You know, he's got like a name that is biblical, a middle name that is biblical, and his confirmation name. Like they are, you know, they got lots of Catholic culture as well. And I was like, well, to me, Catholicism is a religion, but it's also a culture. And that is your family's culture. So I would be okay if Rohan got baptized as Catholic. Okay. And they refused.
Wait, what?
Because I'm not Catholic. And I was like, who cares? I was like, I'm just saying I want you to invite my son into your family and your community.
Right.
Is that a Catholic thing or is
I don't even know.
It is a Catholic thing technically that both
that
parents should be Catholic. And really, if you're going to baptize a kid, what you're like the promise you're making is that you're going to raise your child in that faith. And I was like, none of y'all practice. None of you even go to church. Who cares? Like this is honorary. This is you. To me, it was like you accepting him into your, you know, your people. Right. And they said no. And and really was like, we're like going in defense of it. Well, you're not Catholic. You're like, so? Right. When's the last time any of you been to church?
Right. Like, why did the rules apply here and not in these other areas in your life? Yeah.
Right. I was like, all the other children are baptized, and I have never heard of any of the other cousins going to church even one time.
Okay.
So it was, that to me that felt like evidence that, you know, we tolerate you, you know, but we don't accept you.
Right. So how's your son been dealing with that?
Luckily, they live in New York, and they don't ever come to visit. So honestly, I don't think it really affects him very much at all.
Out of sight, out of mind.
It's kind of a bummer because I would love for him to have that relationship with his grandparents. Right. He does have obviously one set that he sees, you know, 3 times a week, but
which is
clockwork.
I know. Well, I mean, I didn't grow up with any grandparents. Like we came here with nobody, right? And we created our community from other immigrants, but I only got to really see my grandparents like 5 times in my whole life. Okay. So you can have a relationship even without that. Like I used to write letters and things like that, but it feels bad to me to know that his grandparents are there, they're out there, and he has no relationship with them. And there was an opportunity to invite us in, and they turned us down.
Right.
So, you know, I think it just made it clear to me, like, okay, y'all are over there.
Right.
So, let me break this down. You grew up atheist. The co-parent grew up Catholic.
Yep.
You know, cultural background from India, French Canadian.
Where was the middle ground?
Yeah, how did that? I'm curious, like, how did you guys connect?
Yeah, what brought you together in the first place?
That is a great question.
I'm glad this gave away what I was trying to ask. Like,
why did you like this person? I'm just kidding. What did you see in this guy?
Well, honestly, I think what really drew me in is that we were so different.
Yeah, that can be fun at first.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't recognize that the ways in which we were different were actually going to be the things that made it kind of impossible for us to really have a harmonious marriage.
Like you stated earlier.
But that, he was sort of like fly by the seat of his pants and, all those sorts of things. But like we didn't, I guess politics maybe.
Okay.
Like definitely like very liberal viewpoints and, it felt like we were kind of on the same page that way. And that felt important if we were talking about making a life. But gosh, I mean, it's like almost 24 years ago that we met.
Okay.
That it also feels really gray sometimes. Like, what was it that brought us together? And I think maybe it was just that we were so different.
Right, and that was intriguing. It's like, let's build on that.
Yeah.
So,
and maybe like we can make this work.
Yeah.
Right.
We're gonna beat the odds.
I'm stubborn enough for everybody.
Yeah.
So, what advice would you give couples, right, that date interracially? Like, is based on your experiences, is it important to have similar cultural values, or like according to you, like how would you give advice to someone?
Well, I would probably give them some homework assignments.
Okay.
Like
that.
to be quite honest. And so I am seeing somebody.
Yeah.
I am seeing somebody who is also not Indian, and I gave them some homework assignments.
Okay.
I was like, "Look, we're not doing this.
Right.
Like my family is everything to me, and I'm not bringing you into this community unless you unless you're ready to be like invested here. So you have to go learn." And on your own.
Right. Ally shit.
You got to read the books. If you haven't read it yet, start with White Fragility. Like, I mean, and work your way all the way up, like.
It's a great starting point.
I mean, I honestly, that would be one of my piece of advice is like, maybe even sit with your own family of origin and figure out like what are the core values of us that come from our culture. Like what do you think that people don't understand about us? And it could be the family unit, but it could be the cultural piece too. What does this person need to understand and communicate that like these are and figure out as you like are those deal breakers. But for me, they weren't deal breakers back then.
Right.
Because I was like trying to be American, right? I wasn't trying to embrace my own culture, and I didn't realize that in having my own kid, but also as I got older, I wanted to be more connected to my family of origin and all my family. I mean, most of my blood family lives still in India.
Okay.
And I don't get to see them very much, but WhatsApp, Facebook, we can be in more touch. But I want that. And so I didn't know that I would want those things. So I would tell someone like, just assume that you're going to want to be more connected to your culture or some part of your culture when you get older. That's it.
Yes.
If you're in your 20s, it's not cool. When you're in your 40s, almost 50s, I was like, it's at least a curiosity.
Right.
So someone should be curious about that with you now so that you can learn together.
Right.
I'm loving this. Thank you so much. It's been
thank you.
insightful. I don't want this to sound ignorant. Like, I watched this one Indian American family on TV. But the Mindy Kaling project, I just watched it. I watched all of it. And there's parts of it that were hard for me as like a woman of color. I had some opinions on some of the ways that Black people were depicted at first and things like that. But anywho, I did see this trend of like, her dating a lot of white men. And like, I read all the articles and things like that. And then they end up getting married, a Catholic man, and they get divorced. Now they're co-parenting. And I don't know that she ever, I think her parents were like, also like, hey, we raised you to be American. Like, we want you to have this experience. And so, I don't know, I don't know if you ever watched it, but did you see any similarities with the co-parenting or anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, I think, yes, there were a lot of similarities in her stories and mine. And I think a few people like me, who are sort of in that middle weird zone of like we're American, but we're also this other thing.
Right.
I think that it just sometimes when you're like so dedicated to being part of the dominant culture, you're just me. I was so like happy to let go of my own stuff. I mean, like, oh, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. And I think that that is the part that like I see a lot in the in these multicultural relationships, and then the blended families and the co-parenting that happens later, where you're like, no, it does matter.
Right.
It actually matters a lot.
Right.
Like, I don't want my son to feel the shame I felt growing up. I want him to feel proud of who he is.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I was so ashamed of being Indian, and you know,
Really? Because
oh
of
yeah,
upbringing or
Well, just being
upbringing,
immigrating.
being an immigrant,
Yeah.
you know, like being embarrassed. Like when my grandparents, like the couple times they ever came to the country, and I got to spend time with them, and I like flat out rejected them because they're in their like Indian clothes, you know, talking in their language, and I'm like 13 and walking 50 feet in front of it, because also, you know, I was 13.
Right.
You're embarrassed by
young.
everybody,
Yeah,
right? But I was like
exactly. You're young.
mortified
Yeah.
that I would be seen as something not American, that I wouldn't be seen, I wouldn't be included with them.
Right.
And so I think that's the thing that that's just like it's still mirrored in a lot of those narratives is like where like it's sort of culture light. We're like we dabble in it a little bit, but we don't really live it. We don't really immerse ourselves in it because we're like let's pick and choose the parts of our culture that like the white Americans are okay with.
Right. Right. And that's like, I mean, like there's real consequences. So I mean, I hope you give yourself grace. I'm sure you do, and all that. And I love that you get to look at it in hindsight and then leverage that knowledge you have to support your son who has maybe a more similar experience to you than maybe your parents do to you, in some regards. So
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm curious with your son, has he verbalized his interest in learning more about, you know, his mom's culture a little bit, or are you just doing it softly, like letting him like just be immersed in it naturally, or has he expressed interest?
Kind of both. I mean, I think by default he had to be immersed in it because my parents were there and they were like making his food for him and talking with him, and so for him those are his. He got exposures to that culture that I didn't get even that young. Because he had his grandparents there in a way that I would have, you know, had they raised me in India, I would have been raised by my grandparents, and you know, in those first couple years, and I would have had all of those exposures. And so in some ways he's more Indian curious than I am, you know, like, and certainly far more years in advance, like 30 years ahead of me.
okay.
But he's asked to go to India. So we were actually supposed to go March of 2020.
Okay, COVID, that thing.
Yeah. So our trip was March, literally.
Keeps giving.
I know. So we canceled the trip. And so we're actually going to go next year.
Nice.
But he's like excited to go. And I was like, the first time my parents took us to India, I went when I was a little kid, and then we just didn't have money to go for like 10 years. So I went when I was 16. And I mean, I literally threatened to chain myself to the house. I was like, I'm not going. All you do is talk about how dirty India is and how corrupt it is. Why would you take me there? You know?
You did sell me on it, guys.
Not a good sales
And my
pitch.
dad's like, fine, chain yourself to the house. He's like, I will cut it off and put you and that in the plane. And I went and had the most amazing time of my life because then I met all these people who looked like me, finally.
Right.
I met all my cousins. And that trip actually changed my life in a lot of ways. Like, I feel like it made me feel a lot less ashamed of who I was. I was like, oh, there's a whole country of people that look like me? That's amazing. That's cool. You could be somewhere. I mean, I still stood out because of the way I walk and talk. And, you know, we were wearing shorts at one point. Then we stopped doing that because that was bad. We had like literally 15 guys following us.
Oh, wow. Okay.
My mom was like, this is your fault. Put on some clothes.
Told you what to do.
But he's super interested. He likes learning the language. Like, he'll sit with my dad and like have him teach him different words. He likes that he has an Indian first name.
Nice.
So yeah, he's definitely got that spark. And I think, okay, if you're in middle school and you think any part of your parents or your grandparents is mildly cool, I'll take that as a win.
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys are killing it.
That's dope. Man.
What are some things that, and I know we're wrapping up soon, but What are some things that you feel you and your co-parent do well?
I feel like we center our son really well.
Okay.
Good.
That's our that is like when I think about like what is our common thread, at least for the last 12, 13 years, it's him.
Yeah.
He's been the fixture. And so
Beautiful.
yeah, I think we do that. We have different ideas about what school time, homework, activities, things like that, bedtimes.
Yep.
We have pretty different ideas about that, but I'm like, if that's the worst that's happening in the grand scheme of things, I can handle that.
Message.
Right. Absolutely. So I have like two more questions. First one, what are you hoping that your son learns or gains from the trip to India?
I hope that he feels like he belongs in this world. I never felt like I belonged anywhere, and I still kind of, feel like I wander through worlds, which has also got its pluses.
Right.
But I hope he feels like he's got roots here and he has roots somewhere else. I really hope he gets to connect with his cousins who are all his age. They're all 11 to 14. There's 6 boys from 11 to 14
That's squad
that
right
he has
there, yeah.
never
Yeah.
met before. And I'm like, I just want you to know them because you'll all be around when we're all old and gone. So
That's right.
Keep the generation going. Absolutely. And my last question to you is, looking back on it, right? 20 years, you got a beautiful son, result from it. What advice would you have given yourself of what's to come?
Ooh. I did not see any of it coming. But also like the blessings too. Like, I mean, I have to say like where my life is right now is, I could not have pictured this in 1 million years. And I don't think I'm an incapable person. I have a lot of confidence in my ability to make things happen. I couldn't have seen any of this. And I was like, that is, so when I have actually like 7 friends going through divorces right now, and I want to be like, it actually, I know it sounds crazy and really trite, but it actually gets better. And not even better, but like amazing.
Absolutely.
Life gets amazing.
Absolutely.
But while it's getting amazing, there are also some really hard parts too.
Right.
So it's like this big ball of amazing with this ball of really challenging stuff. And the realization I just had recently was, oh, we are actually going to be in a relationship until I die.
Yep. There you go. That's a key one. Another message.
Yeah.
Full of messages. I think that's so key though. I mean, I think I want people to grasp that your life isn't over because your relationship's over. Like I fucking love my life.
Yes.
I love it so much, not trying to compromise and fit and mold something else or mold me. And I just, I don't know, the peace of mind and the fulfillment I have is indescribable. And because our societies just place so much value on like romantic love and marriage, it's just especially as a woman of color, how are you happy you're not married? Like, but you really want to be married though, right? Like, sure, you're happy, but you really want that. Anywho, it's very infuriating, but it's their problem, not mine.
Indeed. I'm like, well, I don't know.
I feel away.
I think about it from I think about like from a medicine standpoint. If a doctor gave you a remedy or a pill and said, well, 52% of the time it doesn't work, would you take it? You wouldn't. So why do we just keep throwing ourselves right back into marriage?
I hear you. That part. These are great questions to ask ourselves. I mean, I do actually it would be nice to get married, but with all that said, I'm gonna take my time.
Yeah.
I'm not in any
rush. I like love.
Yeah. Okay.
I like
Yeah. What's on the horizon for you?
I actually met someone randomly, like introduced from another friend, and
taking the quiz.
I gave him the homework.
Right.
And we have moved like really slowly with like introducing kids and families.
They have kids too.
Okay. Yeah, 2 boys who are 11 and 9. So the 3 of them are like they're buddies, and so it's actually really sweet. But we have taken it very, very slowly, and I would just say that's like, I wish that was always my mindset. That like, what was the rush, right? It was like this adulting box check kind of thing.
Yeah.
The milestone sort of thing. And I was like, what was I in a rush for? I think I was just rushing everywhere. Yeah. So yeah, love is great. And I actually I like that we live in different houses.
I love that.
And we get to hang out when we want to.
Right.
And then I get my own time. Like if my son's not with me and we're not hanging out, I'm like, I get like a night, maybe sometimes 2, all to myself. It is so nice.
Imagine that. People don't see, that's what those full-time parents. I mean, we're all full-time parents, but you know, like
yeah.
They don't know. I so my
What are we doing right now?
okay, it's my life. But like it's a cult. I'm just welcome to the club.
Them full-time parents.
But
they
no,
don't understand
in our
what's
last
going on.
episode with Keisha, so my child's stepmom,
Oh, nice.
she's pregnant with my baby daddy's child, and she was saying, she's like, oh wait, I'm not gonna have weeks off. Like she's gonna be.
No.
She's like, maybe I can send him to you with Dior, and then I'll have my time. I was like, nope, that's not how it really works. I mean, maybe a sleepover here and
Y'all
there.
noticed
but...
that evil laugh that Sydney just gave, right?
What? Was that anyways, have fun with
No,
that.
actually, what will happen is that you'll have both of them. And
Right.
I will be at home in my bathtub.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, this level of childcare is
Awesome.
awesome.
There's some plot going on.
Well, thank you so
Thank you.
much. This has been awesome. Is there any final words, or are you feeling good? This has been amazing.
Yeah.
No, I'm feeling good.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for sharing
Awesome.
your story.
Thank you.
How can people find you?
Yes, I love your
If
blog.
you want to
Oh.
be found, that's
If I
Right,
want
that
to be
part.
found,
Yeah.
you know what? They can find me on my blog.
Okay.
I think it's just drsunita.blog.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great blog. Love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
drsunita.blog.
Yeah.
Make it work.
SUNITA.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank
Right.
you.
Yeah.
Yay.
Thanks.
Appreciate you so much.
Thank you.